An Introduction to 2 Samuel. In the original Hebrew canon, 1 and 2 Samuel were one volume. The prophets Gad and Nathan, who completed the writing of 1 Samuel, wrote all of 2 Samuel. The narrative covers a period of some 37 years, from 1077 to about 1040 BCE, when the writing was completed. 2 Samuel begins shortly after the death of King Saul and concludes just before the death of King David. The book is an intimate and honest account of David's life, as he sought to follow Jehovah with all his heart. In chapter 1, David receives tragic news. Saul and his son Jonathan have died in battle. Deeply grieved, David composes a dirge and calls it the bow. The rest of 2 Samuel can be divided into two sections. Chapters 2 to 4 cover David's kingship over Judah. Chapters 5 to 24 cover his rule over all Israel. In chapter 2, David goes to Hebron, where he is made king over the tribe of Judah. Meanwhile, Saul's army chief Abner makes Saul's son Ishbosheth king over the other tribes. In chapters 3 and 4, however, Abner and Ishbosheth are put to death, and in the following chapter, the people make David king over all Israel. David then captures the Jebusite stronghold of Zion and moves his capital there from Hebron. Zion becomes known also as the City of David. In chapter 6, David has the Ark of the Covenant brought to Jerusalem. In chapter 7, David tells Nathan that he would like to build a house or temple for Jehovah, but God gives this privilege to a future son of the king. However, out of love for David, Jehovah makes a covenant with him for an everlasting kingdom. Chapters 8 and 10 tell about David's victories over the Amalekites, Moabites, Philistines, and other enemies. Chapter 11 brings us to one of the darkest periods in David's life. He commits adultery with Bathsheba. She becomes pregnant, and David has her husband Uriah killed in battle. In chapter 12, Nathan, at Jehovah's direction, reproves David. He also says that calamity will befall David's house and that Bathsheba's newborn son will die. Bathsheba, who is now David's wife, becomes pregnant again and gives birth to Solomon. In chapters 13 to 18, the foretold calamities on David's house begin. David's son Absalom conspires to usurp the throne, and David is forced to flee Jerusalem. In chapter 18, David's men defeat Absalom's, and Joab puts Absalom to death. Did you know? 2 Samuel powerfully illustrates the Bible's honesty. Even the failings of Israel's great leaders are openly exposed. We also see that truly repentant sinners, while reaping what they have sown, can be forgiven. In chapter 23, David humbly acknowledges, "The Spirit of Jehovah spoke through me. His word was on my tongue." In chapter 24, David is incited to register the nation. This bad act angers Jehovah, who brings a scourge on the people. At the prophet Gad's direction, David buys the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite, builds an altar there, and offers up sacrifices to God. At Jehovah's command, the scourge against Israel is halted. As you read 2 Samuel, see how honestly God's prophets recorded Israel's history. Observe how sin can have tragic consequences. And note God's promise to give David a lasting kingdom a promise fulfilled in Jesus Christ, the Son of David and King of God's kingdom.